Dr. Pam Perry. So today's show is going to be a little bit different. I would say it's going to be like a mashup between a speaker's magazine show and an Amazon live show, because this speaker has a lot to share with speakers, but he also has a book that is nonfiction book. It's just being realized. It's about enlightenment. So we're going to talk about both of those today. So you're going to get a treat today because you're going to get two intros, right? You're going to get an intro of the speaker's magazine, which it's like all by itself. It doesn't, but then you're going to also get the Pam Perry picks. So it's kind of like different because he's different. Corey Poirier is different. And all the way around, you got to hear his story. So I'm going to show a little bit of the Speaker's Magazine, what this is all about. And now, because we're streaming on Amazon, and this is a Pam Perry pick as well. So you're going to bear with me because this is a wrap. This is hot.
Hey yo, kick back, relax, let's dive in the page. Pam Perry picks got the books for your brain. From fiction to non-fiction, all genres insane. We coming through showing love to the lit game. Greatest stories ever told, gotta find your pick. Imagination running wild, ain't nothing slick. Get lost in the pages, let your mind drift. Pam Perry picks got your brain in the bookshelf vibe. Turning the pages with pride. Pam Perry picks got the words by your side. Bookshelf vibe, turning pages with pride. Pam Perry picks got the words by your side. From the classics to new, we got the books for you. Get your mind right, let the knowledge accrue. Bookshelf vibe, expanding horizons wide. Pam Perry kicks, keeping readers satisfied. Books up high, knowledge we can't deny. Get your reading on, just book one fly. Click cover image.
I had to do that. So Corey is a four-time, I think, TEDx speaker, sought after keynote. He's done all kind of things. He shared the stages with John Maxwell, Deepak Chopra, Stephen Covey, tons of people. And I'm excited to have him on the show today. There you go. Hey there.
Well, thank you so much. And did I see correctly by the way, I love the promo video. You have your own theme song, and I just dig that. Like, I need to get a theme song. And did I see in the video, I think I saw Simon. Did I see Simon Bailey in there and Eric Thomas?
Yes. They're definitely old clients of mine from way back. Yes. They are some of the and Les Brown, George Fraser. There is just so you're like a mashup of the Pam Perry's picks, which is on Amazon Live, which is what initially we said we would do, and hold up the book because you do have a book. The book is brand new. Well, it's coming out. So it's the Enlightened Passenger. It's about enlightenment, but it's a fiction. It's different because it's a nonfiction book, but it's based on the thousands of interviews that you've done, correct?
Yeah, so it's a fictional parable, basically. Okay. So for those that may have heard of books like The Alchemist or Celestine Prophecy or The Four Agreements or Og Mandino's books as well.
Ooh, I love Og Mandino's books.
And actually, that's what it's been most compared to, and that's the writing style. And also the guy that wrote the foreword, Richard Paul Evans, he literally tells a story about how he was at a book signing with Og Mandino. He was a huge fan. He was younger, and he regrets that he never went up and said hi to introduce himself and said, "Your work impacted my life." It's one of his biggest regrets is that he didn't walk up and say it. So Og is kind of connected to the book for sure.
Yes. So this is the book.com. I want people to go there because they can actually get it and pre-order and all that, because it'll be rolling out. But this is the book.com. That's the coolest URL I ever heard. But you also have another one too. So this is cool too. That speaker guy.
Yeah, you know what? Where that came from, Pam, is people used to say to me, "Aren't you, you're that speaker guy, right?"
Mm-hmm,
and then eventually I started saying, well, if they're going to say that, I might as well own it. And then I used to actually put it on my tags, like when I go to events, networking, and it would just be that speaker guy. I didn't even put my name. It was very intentional. But yeah, you can see a theme, right? This is the book.com, that speaker guy. I have other domains that are similar, like the book of why.
Yeah.
What's that? Sorry?
what people say. That's what they say. So that's what it's going to be on the .com. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the book.com. That speaker, that is genius. I have a friend, his name is Jeff, and he loves domains. He is like in the domain buying business. And so whenever he hears one from his ear, he'll go and buy it, and then he'll sell it, and he'll make thousands of dollars from the domain from what people have just said. Like, I should buy that domain. That's the thing. So we're streaming on Amazon Live as well. So people can actually buy it on Amazon now. It's pre-order, correct?
Yeah, 100%. It's available on
Good.
Amazon pre-order. And if you want to, I know we're going to go in a couple of different areas, but I'll tell people if you want just a super quick synopsis of the book, just
Yeah,
so,
cool.
I know if I were thinking about or looking at a book, I'd want to know what's it even about, really.
Mhm.
And so here's the deal. The idea behind the enlightened passenger, you can see in the front cover, there's a plane in the background type thing. And
Mhm.
the idea is for me as a speaker, traveling so much over 20 some years, when I came up with the idea, it was going to be two strangers sitting somewhere together, like could be a coffee shop, whatever. But it occurred to me, well, I'm on planes all the time. That's where it should be. And
Yes.
so essentially, it's a young guy on a plane. He's the main character. He's very arrogant. He thinks he knows it all. He pays for the seat next to him in VIP, so nobody will sit next to him. And then he falls asleep. He wakes up, an old guy sitting next to him, and kind of like, "Hi there, I'm here now." And he's like, "How did you get here?" And he said, "They bumped me up because the plane was full." And so
Mm.
that's kind of the start of it. And essentially it's called The Flight That Changes Everything. And the idea is the young guy figures he can't learn anything new, but he finds that the older guy is rich financially. So he's like, I want to know how he did that. So he placates him and listens. But what happens is he ultimately starts learning about how to become a richer person through and through.
Mhm.
And the older person is described as a Wayne Dyer-esque type guy.
Ooh, really?
The young person is like a salesman who makes a lot of money but spends a lot of money.
Oh,
And here's the interesting part, Pam. What I didn't realize when I wrote it, and I only figured it out like a year later, is I'm both passengers. So
okay.
in other words, I wasn't arrogant, which is why I kind of thought I wasn't the younger passenger. But the truth is, I thought I knew it all. I didn't understand personal development. I never read a book until age 27. So I was in sales. I was really successful, but I didn't understand self-help. And so
Mm.
now I'm definitely not Wayne Dyer, but I feel like that's what the direction I'm headed. And so ultimately, I feel like I'm a bit of both passengers. And then how you said about it's loosely based on nonfiction as well, because I weave in those interviews, and how I present them is if
Okay.
I sat in Les Brown's living room and he told me, Corey, God's synchronicity is God's way of staying anonymous. That, like literally in Atlanta, sitting in his living room, that's what he said to me. But in the character Treb, who's the older character, he talks about how he was backstage with Les in the green room, and Les said that. So what I
I
did was I
love that.
what
Yeah.
really happened and weaved it into kind of it's happening to this character that's sort of made up, but really sort of my journey is built into that character. So hopefully that gives people a good feel. And it's 10 lessons that are delivered through the journey of the book.
Okay. So you interviewed how many people though over the course of the 20 years on your podcast and things like that? Was it 4,000? I saw some numbers 4,000, some 7,000. So
Yeah. Well, and the reason that that's the case is because, of course, it's an ever evolving number. But, of course, if you cement it and say it's 4,000 now, that stuff's still going to be out there, even when you're at 5,006. So the number now, and I want to clarify too, because I know some people think, how is that even physically possible? The number's over 7,500 now, and
wow.
it keeps
Okay.
building. So, like, I've probably done, if I went back and looked at the numbers, I've probably done 500 in the last 12 months. So
Whoa.
like 50 some months.
And
And
that's on your podcast.
yeah, so it's on the podcast, but here's the thing. So here's how it's possible. The first 3,500, probably a little more, were done from a newspaper that I had for 7 years. It was a monthly newspaper, similar to Success Magazine. And I would do 80 interviews a month to fill the paper.
Wow.
Here's the thing, I didn't write them. I just wanted to do the interviews. So if you crunch the numbers, that's what, 4 a day on average. And so I just kept interviewing people. So how the number, I mean, I'm guessing when I say, how many's happened in the last 12 months, because we have it tracked, but I'd have to go back and look and see the exact numbers. But let's say it's 50 a month. That's not on the podcast. I mean, we don't even, the podcast is on hiatus now for the last few months. But what it is that we have 4 podcasts. So I'm doing interviews different times for different ones. On top of that, though, we have our Blue Talks brand. And our Blue Talks brand, we go on the road. We do sometimes 2 events a month. At those
Okay.
events, I usually, if we have a 3-day event, I interview 2 people at least a day. So one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So for example, we could go there for a 3-day weekend, and I might interview, 6 or 7 or 8 people on top of the interviews that I'm already doing for the podcast, on top, and it goes on top of and top of. So
Oh,
just explain to people how it's possible. It's just, I just keep interviewing people. I don't stop. I'm obsessed with it.
that is the thing though, where the personal development just was like the thing that really says, okay, how can I learn from other people? So with the book, the Enlightened Passenger, they're sitting next to someone that is basically a composite of the interviews that you have done over the years, like the 7,000, 7,500, and you're using it in a fiction format, in a parable format. And like you said, they're behind stage, you're talking to Les, and there's a quote from there. So you had to really remember, I guess, is that like a gift of yours that you can really remember all of these conversations? It's like, how are they all in your head and you can condense it down into a book that's so many, like 200 and something pages, right? How did you decide who to pick out the best lessons of and for, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a very valid question, because honestly, I know. So if somebody said, "What's your superpower?" to me, like, I have lots of flaws, lots of weaknesses. Whenever I first started, I played music for years now in clubs and have CDs out. But when I started, I was tone deaf. I still can't tune a guitar by ear. Like, it was not natural. I didn't have the skill. I put in the 10,000 hours. And so I
Mm.
say this to say, wasn't even my superpower. Being a speaker, by the way, I started out as the guy that was covered in sweat, almost fell off the stage, everything. That's not my superpower. I had to learn all those things. The one superpower, if I have one, I might have, is my memory.
Ah,
So,
okay. That
so to
that's
answer
that's
your question,
Brown's too as well. That is one of his thing is he memorized. His memory
yeah,
is amazing.
like, I
Yeah,
can say to him, and I've done, maybe 9 interviews less over the years. And
love
by the way,
that.
I include those as 9, not 1. So if I've
Yeah.
interviewed somebody multiple times, it's multiple. But Les, I can say to him, Les, sometimes I'll do that. I'll say, this story needs to be heard by this audience right now. And so I'll say, Les, one of the things you told me about was this. Do you know what story I'm talking about? And it's amazing to me. In his, late 70s, and he can tell, oh, you mean the story about, every now and then he thinks I mean a different one, because he has 2 stories that are interweaved into the same story.
Wow.
Like, when he talks about the richest place in the world being the graveyard, but he
Mhm,
has 2
mhm.
stories tied together with that one. So every now and then I have to mention which one I mean. I'm usually meaning the one where he says the graveyard's the richest place because that's where all of people's dreams and hopes and everything have gone to die.
Yes.
And then he talked about another one where it's the ghosts of your past that are standing around your bed,
Ah,
and
yeah.
saying, why didn't you take us and do something with us, and so on. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
2 stories in one. But yeah, Les has that kind of memory. And again, when you can still do that at almost 80, that's mind-blowing. I interviewed the late Bob Proctor about 4 years ago. He was
Oh, I love
85 at the
him.
time. And
Mhm,
same deal, like his memory, like, first of all, he could probably do a cartwheel if he wanted at that time. Like, he still looked like he was 20 something. But
mhm.
everything, if you bring up a story, he can tell you. He used to read Think and Grow Rich from it every day for 60 some years, Bob Proctor, I mean. And he could tell you where certain parts of the book were, like, oh, it's on page whatever. So
Mm.
I think a lot of speakers probably, when they get into speaking, they have that sort of memory. And you almost have to, I think, not have to, but I think you have to at least have a good memory, or have a way to trigger a story. So one of the things I do, maybe because I don't want to burn my memory out, is when I'm doing a talk, is I always put visuals on the screen, because the visual reminds me of the story. So I
Yes.
don't use bullet points, but I use PowerPoint, because I'll have a picture of me performing stand-up, and that tells me I'm going to share the story about when I first started stand-up and bombed horribly. But going
Mhm.
back to your point, yes, I have a good memory. But what also happens is, when I was writing the book, I did, in deciding what stayed in for those 10 lessons, I did over and over say, if my sons, 2 young sons, if I could sit in front of them today and I only had 24 hours and I had to share 10 lessons, which ones would I share? And if one lesson felt like it wouldn't be the one, it got removed somehow and I found something new. So there was
Mm.
a bit of planning. But the memory side, what happens is, if I was sharing a story, I would figure out, like, it would come to me as I'm writing, because I wrote it like a fictional story. It would come to me that I would say, talking about synchronicity, and then the character would say, well, what is synchronicity? And then he would say, well, let me tell you what Les Brown told me when we were backstage. So what happens is, I have the memory of Les saying synchronicity is God's way of staying anonymous. And then that's how I brought that in. So another example is Lisa Nichols talks often about, don't just fill from your cup when it's full, Wait till it's overflowing into a saucer.
Mhm.
So that never left me when she shared that. So I put that in as well. And so I think, to your point, there's some of those moments that stand out so much I had to include them. But I think as well, it had to fit the story. So it had to be, somebody told me, Robin Sharma one time said about how he learned from Warren Buffett to reverse engineer his life and basically say, who do I want to be on the rocking chair at 80? And to be that person, what do I have to do every year until then? And so he talked about how to live your life accordingly to the fullest. And so what I did in the book is one of the chapters is called The Mayfly. Now, I found this out from a show episode of Everybody Loves Raymond when the brother said something about mayflies. I didn't know they only live 24 hours.
Oh,
and so that fascinated me.
They gotta be busy.
Yeah, they got to be busy. Well, not only that, you didn't hear the best part. That's the male. The female mayfly, if you look this up, she lives 3 to 5 minutes. So she's got to get real busy. Her whole purpose in life is just to have more mayflies. But I bring this up because I went with the 24-hour one. And what I did was I said, if you were the mayfly, how would you live your only 24 hours? One character says it to the other. The other character says all the stuff he do, and he goes, well, then how come you're not doing it now? And so that I got from Robin Sharma's Reverse Engineers. That makes sense how I tie it all together?
Yes. So how did you meet all of these people? So Corey, this is the thing. I mean, we've got John Lee Dumas, you got Bob Berg on your side. You've got so many. I mean, Lisa Nichols, you're dropping these names. Like these are, so I know you've been doing it 20 years, but I know a lot of speakers who've been speaking for 20 years and they have not met all the people that you met. So where was the tipping point, or where was the break, I guess you would say? Because I know you were in music and then you did comedy and then you started speaking, and then all of a sudden you're meeting like the superstars of speaking. So where, if someone was starting out speaking, it's like, how the heck did he do that? And then you've done like 4 TEDx talks. You know, that's like the holy grail. Everybody wants to do a TEDx talk, right? They want to do a TED talk and they want to get thousands and thousands and thousands of views. So how did you meet all these people? And what was it intentional? Was it just your purpose? What was it?
So, I mean, this is something I've looked at often because there's 2 aspects to it. So on the speaking side, I met some of the speakers because I was literally speaking at the same conference as them. Now, the intentional part though, Pam, is you can be speaking at the same conference as your favorite speaker and never try to find out where they're at, or never, if they have a book signing, you never try to find them. So for me, I'm not that guy. So let's say John C. Maxwell is speaking at the event I'm at. Well, I usually know he's going to be doing a book signing. Well, I'll go to the book signing. I just did this 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago in New York with Robin Sharma. So I interviewed Robin in the past. So there's a creative nature to this. So I interviewed Robin in the past for a book I did years ago called Conversations With. And let me see if I can grab it really quick without going off the screen much. I'll just show you it backs up what I'm saying. So I went to the event and Robin was doing his talk. And like I said, I had met him before, but I brought this book whenever Robin said, do you have any questions for me? And Robin is right there. And I said, Robin, I don't know if you remember, but 15 years ago. And I said, I even brought a copy of the book for you. And my point is, then I stood out. And then when I got up to talk to Robin, I said, hey, how do I go about getting an interview again? And then he goes, oh, there's my buddy McCall. Go talk to him and he'll send you his number and so on. So what I'm getting at is the same thing would happen if you're speaking at the Bill. Go to the book signing, build a relationship. But if you want to reach somebody like that, honestly, the best time to reach them is when they're signing your book, and just say, hey, do you do interviews? While they're signing it, because they're a captive audience. And at the same time, they're more apt to say yes because you're supporting them right as you're asking. Now, having said that, that's a hack if you want to call it. But honestly, for me, so here's a couple of things. Shortcut to building a lot of relationships with a lot of influencers is don't try to take shortcuts. So what I mean by that is I call it depositing. You need to deposit into a relationship multiple times before you ask. So Gary Vaynerchuk wrote this book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the premise was,
I love that book.
It's brilliant. And the concept with the name, for those that haven't heard of it, is the jab is give, give, give. So give, 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 and then ask. And so I tried to practice that. So, I mean, it's different if you only get one chance to meet them at a book signing, like I mentioned, then just ask, go for the goal. If you don't ask, the answer is no. But if you start from scratch, what I do, so how it started for me was Jack Canfield was the first big domino. I call it knocking down the dominoes because I say the biggest one's the hardest one to knock down, the first one. And so I kept running at that domino, trying to give it drop kicks, everything. And
Jack was the man.
What's that? Sorry?
He sold millions and millions of books.
Him and Mark 600 million. It's crazy. Depending on who you ask, 600 million at least. And so they told me no. They said the answer is probably going to be no, Corey. He's busy. He's not promoting anything. He's not doing any interviews. So I didn't accept no. I said I accepted from them no, but I said I'm not done yet. And so what I did was I noticed that. So here's a hack again. I went to the website, Jack's website, and I said, I wonder who's endorsing Jack. Maybe I can get to them. So I noticed this guy named Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. And Dan is well known in our world, but he's not out there like, you know what I mean? Like Jack would be. He's not known it's a different way, but he's built so many businesses and so many expert space lives from what he does. And so what I did was I tracked down Dan, and he was on Success Magazine CD. I listened to the interview with Darren Hardy. I said, that's my same interview style. I'm gonna send a clip of mine and Darren's to Dan's team and show them that I'm like that. Because he said in the interview it was his favorite interview he'd ever done. So I'm like, well, he'll probably say yes to his second favorite interview he's ever going to do. And so I sent that along, and they said, yeah, this sounds like something Dan would be interested in. I got Dan on the show, and then here's what I did. I kept bringing up Jack because he works with him. So it made for good stories. But he said twice in the interview, you know what? You need to bring Jack on the show. He'd love it. And you tell him Dan said so.
Oh, I love that. I love it. That's a full circle moment, because it really is. It was intentional with the standpoint of just really providing value to both of them, and really just showing that, hey, I'm not just a fan. I really do want to share my gift with you and your gift with my audience. And that is genius. That is genius. That's George Fraser, Dr. George Fraser. He's one of my mentors, and he does a Power Network conference every year. And that's what he talks about too, about the jab or the give. You give first before you actually ask. And that's, most speakers don't realize that the way they're going to get most speaking gigs is really by personal networking.
Yes.
So you got to get good at that. But then you got to get networking. You got to have a personality. You got to be likable. You got to dig into maybe some personal development. That's what your book is kind of just helping people understand the whole process of that. So I had one question. You help people get paid to speak. So people know that when you do a TEDx talk that you don't get paid. But how do you leverage it so that you are getting paid? And how do you help other people? You're the other part of you is that speaker guy. So how do you help other people get paid?
So this is the other area where it wasn't a superpower when I started, but I feel like after working like a bulldog, it eventually became a superpower. So I figured out some hacks that legit were responsible for about 65% of my paid bookings from that point forward. To tell you how crazy it got for a while, 3 consecutive years, I did 200 paid bookings a year, each year. So you know how, now I'd love to say that's
like every day, almost every day.
It is, but it's like less than one a day. I'd like to say I have a record or something, but here's the thing. If you know who Dr. John DeMartini is, he told me one time that he does over 400 paid bookings a year. More than one a day. So what it is he'll get booked by a conference that'll have like, or a conference, I should say, a big company, and they'll have like 8 offices in town, and they'll book him to do 15-minute talks for each one. So he can do like 8 talks in one day. It's not like he's going doing, 8 45-minute keynotes.
Okay.
But he also doesn't drive. He has a driver that takes him everywhere. He writes his speeches and does everything in the car. Like that's him. So I'm only half that, but still 200. I'm telling you, I wouldn't do it again. It's a lot of days on the road. I couldn't do it with the family at all. Having said all of that, I just say that to say I did figure out a hack for how to get these bookings. So going back to your original point, I can give people a hack that could change everything for them in 2 minutes, and I will. But to say the other side on the speaking, you asked about TEDx first. So I understand the power of leveraging a TEDx enough to know that even though I wanted to retire after 3, here's the thing you wouldn't know because it happened in the last 3 weeks. I did my 5th one. And I have a lady who's reaching out to me saying, are you going to submit for this one, Corey? And she's kind of it's through a mutual friend. And so if I do it, that would be 6. And that would be like landing 2 in a matter of 6 weeks, which here's the funny part, because I'm trying to retire from it, then they're coming at me because I'm not like, because it's like I've said to the universe, I don't need those. And then I find that they happen more. Having said that, the TEDx side, we can track one of my TEDx talks. We can track 300 paid speaking engagements to it. Now, that's not them all coming from the talk. That's if they're thinking of hiring me, instead of a sizzle reel, I sent them that video. So having said that, to your point, you do not get paid for TEDx. And that's why I say it's the least I've ever been paid for a talk, because 0 is the least, other than if I paid to speak, but it's the least I've ever been paid to talk. And yet it's probably one of the most abundant talks I've ever delivered. Yeah. And so to answer the bigger question there is, how do you leverage it? Obviously, first you have to land the TEDx. Interestingly enough, that's why people started coming to me and we started helping people land their TEDx. We've had 31 clients that we work with in general land combined over 30 talks since January.
Wow.
So it's almost 3 a week. That's
so
our
yeah, you found the blueprint for that.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of, there's a whole bunch of layers to it, but I've spent a lot of time in it. Having said that, the leverage side of it goes back to what I just said. So the leverage part of it is, first of all, having a TEDx, nothing else, you do nothing else except for say you're a TEDx speaker, it's still going to positively impact your career. So when you go do a talk for a company and they say, up next, we have a multiple time TEDx speaker, that's when people look over at you. So the clients like it because they can book and say we have a TEDx speaker. B, the audience, and here's the cool part, will actually listen closer to your talk. That's when I see them put their cell phone down. Oh, TEDx speaker? What they say TEDx? I don't know why, but it has this sort of mystique with it. So just being able to say in your bio that you're a TEDx speaker is huge. But the other side is, here's what I learned, which took me a while to realize. I had this $8,000 3-minute sizzle reel that I thought was the best I was ever going to have to book bookings. And all of a sudden I started using my TEDx instead. And it was closing at about 85% of people that saw it that were thinking of hiring me, that decided it based on the TEDx. It was about 65% with my sizzle reel that I spent so much money on. And so I asked clients why that was. And they said it's because with this TEDx talk, we see the whole talk, but it's still short. So we don't mind watching a 7-minute or 9-minute talk. But the great part is we get to see you for a full talk, not just the clip you chose to show us. And so they said, we get to see all of you. If you bombed, we get to see it. And so I think that's probably why. And my last one was 7 minutes. That's why I encourage people, if you can, I have a 5-minute TEDx. So if you send a 5-minute TEDx, there's no reason that a client won't watch that any less than a 3-minute sizzle reel, especially if you say, hey, if you want to see a full talk. And then they also get to see you could actually pull a talk off in 5 minutes with an actual beginning, middle, and close. Having said, again, all of that, the TEDx, that's kind of how you leverage it, is use it as your sizzle reel. You have it everywhere that people see you. It'll actually help you with SEO online, because when people search me, for the longest time, they just search my name. For videos that popped up, it was almost always the TEDx.
It is. That's one of the ones that just came up. That's why I got 4 times, but I didn't know now it's going to be 5 and 6 times.
Because it's not anything else.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that's how you would leverage it. And if you want, I'll tell you the one hack I teased so that people can take their speaking career to the next level. Is that cool?
Yeah.
But yeah, so on the TEDx side, just know it is game changing. And I won't go down the full rabbit hole, but I will say there's things that a lot of people don't realize. Like if you're a spiritual speaker, TEDx isn't looking for spiritual talk. So you need to understand how to reframe your talk and things like that. So there is a lot of reasons why people will apply 30 times and not land it. A big part of it is they don't know the process. They're, just typing and pressing send and have never really explored what is the actual TEDx side looking for. For instance, they don't like the term motivational speaker. So if your bio says so-and-so is a motivational speaker, right away they're like, not really interested. So again, there's a lot of stuff to know there. But on the hack that I was going to share, one of the 2 things that I did that was responsible for 60-some% of my bookings is simply handed out an evaluation form. Now that part sounds easy, but I crafted an evaluation form that took me years to craft to get the right 7 questions. And then when every talk I do, unless it's to 5,000 people, because you can't do it with 5,000 people, I would say, hey, is there any chance I can hand out my evaluation form? And here's what I'll do in return. Like I'll give everybody a digital copy of my book, for example. And having said that, sometimes they'll say, well, we're already using an app to send in the forms. And I try to talk them out of that, because I've been doing this long enough to tell you, when they have an app for the event, they usually get 5% responses back. When I hand out the form and offer a free book, I get 90 to 95%.
Oh, there you go, free book.
Not only that, it's because, and I also get the responses back for me personally, instead of like rate Corey 1 out of 10, I have specific questions. So one is, what did you learn during today's talk? And then the second question is, how are you going to use it to increase your productivity? Or depending on or if it's an employee, it might say, what are you going to do to help with your job or what have you? The next question is is there anything Corey covered that you covered a little bit, but didn't cover enough that you wish you would talk about more? That becomes obviously powerful because you can go back and say, hey, I mentioned personality types, but I didn't cover it. Maybe we should do a second session. Or if you're speaking, let's say, to realtors at an association, and 90% say we wish we knew more about that, you could actually go to brokers now with that and say, hey, most realtors seem to want to know about this. Have you guys ever had a training on this or a session? But the biggest one, Pam, is the question that says, do you know of others who could hire Corey to speak and deliver a similar presentation of the one he delivered today?
That part.
I'll tell you why it's so powerful is if you deliver a great talk, and this has been the case for years, people will come up and say, hey, here's my card. I'm going to reach out. We need to book you for our event. For years ago, that would happen. You could get 30 people to walk up and say that. Now there's so many speakers, so much competition. Everybody's so busy that what'll happen is people will go, oh, I'd love to walk up and talk to Pam, but there's 5 people in front of her. I got to get back to the office. Yeah. And all that, or I'm scared to approach a speaker. So getting it done in the form, they actually can fill out the form and feel like I didn't even have to talk to Pam. And then my point of that is usually what'll happen if I have 100 people in the audience and I deliver a solid talk, I'll probably get 30 people reply, say, you need to reach out to talk to us about our event. And then from there, I'll qualify to get down to how many I can actually hire. But here's why this is so powerful. If I were starting today, brand new speaker, and you dropped me in a city and said, build a speaking business, what I'm sharing with you, that's one of the 2 things I would do. So the reason for what I would actually do to, if I hadn't done any talks yet, is I would call a chamber of commerce or an association and say, hey, I normally charge for my talks, but I'm willing to do a no-fee talk for you. And all I want in return is 2 things. 1, a testimonial if you like my talk. And 2, I can bring my evaluation form and get it filled out.
There you go.
So then I'm in front of a room of 100 people who could potentially hire me. And then I now get them to write whether or not they want to hire me. And you see where it goes from there. And so I'll stop there and say, that's one of the things that I wish I would have known when I started.
I love that. It's so much gems in that, Corey. I love that because this is Speakers Magazine show. A lot of speakers are just trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, I'm just speaking and I'm speaking for free. And I can't. So that part right there will help. But a lot of it is I guess you would say it's a superpower of you in terms of you really developing your personal development of just understanding people, because a lot of people wouldn't even know. Well, okay, so I always say God doesn't waste anything. So you were in sales for many years before you actually reached into this other part. So you're basically selling yourself. A lot of speakers don't know how to do that. They know how to speak from the stage and motivate or inspire, but then that other part of like selling themselves or in front of an audience and just really connecting with them. And you said that speaking was not the thing that was your superpower, but you worked on it like a bulldog. Most people would kind of give up and say, yeah, it's not that easy, so I'm not going to, but you actually, so the main thing first is you've got to have a good talk, you got to speak well. So that is, and then the main thing for a book, it's got to be a good book. So how long did it take you to put this book together that's coming out soon? How long was it in the process, or from the germination of, germinating as an idea to where it is now? How long did it take?
So, it took a year from idea until I literally sat down and said, I need to write this book. Then it took a year from the time I sat down to write this book. Now, it's a tiny book. It didn't take a year consecutively to write it. What it was is I sit down and say, okay, I'm going to get as much done as I can now. And we went on how it started. I finally jumped in. I did about half the book on a family vacation where we took a real vacation, but there's certain things that my wife and the kids love doing that I'm not such a fan of. And so I said, hey, if we take this vacation, are you okay if I do some writing? Because to me, the writing was something I love doing. So it was like vacation to me. And she's like, I don't care. That's easier for us. We don't have to worry about you, sitting there. Like I don't swim, but I love the beach. But for example, if it was a pool, there's no point in me going to a pool because I'm just going to sit there and read a book or say hi to them when they're in the pool. So that type of thing, when they were doing those type of things, we planned it accordingly that I'd write then. So I wrote a half the book then, and then I stopped and then stop with, pages at a time. And that's what took the year. And then the next stage was I got beta readers to read it and give their feedback and then kind of rewriting. This blows my mind because there wasn't a whole lot of rewriting. Like normally I'm used to rewriting a lot, but people were like, this book's ready. And like the grammar was not good. And they were saying that, but they're like, the grammar's not great, but you can get that edited.
But the story,
they said, it's ready. Don't change anything.
That is
So that was pretty cool. So that took another probably year. So answer your question about 3 years from start to finish. Now, having said that, something I talk about what you just said all the time is I think a good book or a good talk is the cost of admission, meaning it doesn't even start until you have that part locked in. So I'm doing a big launch with this book. Well, if I had a crappy book, and again, it's my book, so it's hard to, it's hard to brag and say it's a good book, but I do believe I put in the effort to make it a good book.
Yeah, you took the time.
Yeah. And so I think first and foremost, I see people do that all the time. I'm going to do a massive book launch and I have a 30-page PDF I'm using as my book. Sorry, I'm not in. Like, that's not a book. And so in a time now where AI is writing a lot of books, it's important to have a good book. So I think the cost of admission to impacting lives of the book is, first of all, writing a decent book.
Mm-hmm. That is, and it's the same thing with speaking as well. You got to have a good talk and you got to have something to say. You have to have something to say. I love talking with you, Corey. I could go so many different ways to talk with you about you being the comedian and that kind of thing. But I want people to go to thisisthebook.com. They can learn more about you. And they can also too go to thatspeakerguy.com as well if they want to know those two things. So between both of those, I just wish you so much success on this launch. It's going to be really, really good and impacting people. I mean, the books, the Ogmandina books, they're classics. So I hope this becomes that classic for you, or classic for us, I guess you would say, because it sounded like you took a lot of time, and it's a good way of, like you said, sitting on the airplane. Whenever I sit next to somebody on the airplane, you never know. I think what you said, what Les Brown says, synchronicity is God's way of just remaining anonymous. So you just never know how God will set somebody next to you and like, okay, well, that was the reason for that. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a total package. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, with that, I just thank you for joining us today on the Speakers Magazine show and on Amazon Live, so people can actually buy it there as well. So take care, and I will talk with you soon. God bless.
Thanks, everyone.